Hey, this is the landlord warrior, Rob Wells here from Lost Robert Wells. Hey, got a question the other day about dealing with a tenant's personal belongings. And landlord asked, could they basically dispose of the tenant's belongings after 18 days? And the answer is actually no. Landlords, you gotta basically prepare an inventory of any personal property left behind by your tenant once they leave the property, whether or not there are different rules if a tenant's evicted by the sheriff versus at any other time. If a tenant just leaves personal property after they terminated their tenancy, or if they just up and abandon the property. Generally speaking, a landlord must provide a tenant an inventory of the items left behind. And here's a couple of different tricks that you can do. Number one thing is always take a video of the entire unit, how it was left. A lot of times tenants leave, junk and trash in your unit, and, I'll get the question, what do I inventory? Well, obviously you want to inventory any personal property that obviously has some type of value. I'm of the opinion that, hey, if something's broken, like let's say the tenant left a broken sofa that's stained and dirty, I write that in the inventory. Hey, one stained and dirty sofa, for example, just because, hey, what you think is junk may be someone else's treasure. I think that's what the saying is. So in order to protect yourself, and to prevent liability, you're going to have to put that on your inventory. Now, another question we get is, Rob, let's say the tenant left a bunch of moving boxes and that they're taped up, or they're like trash bags of clothes. The rule is under the civil code is if it's readily secured to the point where you can't easily access it, i.e., let's say a box is taped, or even trash bags, they're basically tied up together in a knot. You don't have to actually open up that bag or box. You can, or if it's a locked container, you can just notate, hey, trash bag was left, or if there were 10 trash bags, 10 black trash bags were left on the inventory, and you can avoid liability. And then the last rule you need to remember is, if the value of the items left behind is worth $700 or less, landlords, you can dispose of that property 18 days after you give your tenant the inventory notice of what was left behind. If it exceeds $700, you're gonna have to sell that the personal property at a public sale. And what that means is you're gonna legally, by law, you have to publish a notice of the inventory in the newspaper. I'll tell you, landlords, that gets very expensive. If you have a situation like that, I always recommend that the landlord always work with the tenant on trying to get their personal belongings as much as possible, because if you have to do a public sale, the newspaper publication alone is probably going to run you a couple of grand, because these newspapers are hurting, they need revenue, and they're pretty expensive. So, basically you got to give this inventory to the tenant. Another tip is, another question we always get is, where does that inventory, how do I give it to the tenant? Let's say they don't give me they don't give you a forwarding address, or you can't give the inventory to the tenant in person. Well, the law says you mail it back to the rental unit address. So that's how you deal with that. So those are some quick tips on dealing with tenants abandoned personal property, or property left behind after they vacated a unit outside a sheriff's sale. There's slightly different rules for that, but generally, yeah, you're going to have to give your tenant an inventory of items left behind. The risk, if you don't follow the law on this, is the tenant could come back after you for damages, like you wrongfully disposed of their property. So it's best that you do it in a legal fashion. Hey, if you got any questions about this, you know, it is a kind of funky topic. Put them in the comments. I'll answer them. Till next time, folks, Landlord Warrior out. Take care.